Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. I'm here today to continue our little discussion about Habakkuk. We've already had a couple of sessions and we have another couple to go yet. And today I'd like to look at the third verse, the third chapter, and verse 2. Now, Habakkuk has already complained to God, heard God answer him, complained about the answer, heard God explain the answer. And now we have Habakkuk's prayer, if you will. Chapter 3 starts out by saying this prayer was sung by the prophet Habakkuk. And I'm going to do the first verse and then one towards the end. I have heard all about you, Lord. I am filled with awe by your amazing works. In this time of our deep need, help us again, as you did in years gone by. And in your anger, remember your mercy. And then verse 13 says, you went out to rescue your chosen people, to save your anointed ones. Well, Habakkuk has changed over the course of this note letter, this prophet. We've seen that change in his tone of voice, in his ideas, in his acceptance, in his difficulties in dealing with God. And that's what we all have. We all have troubles trying to understand God. I mean, why not? I mean, we're just not smart enough. Our minds aren't big enough to comprehend the true purposes of God and all of the things he does and the way he does them. It just doesn't happen. So after all of the back and forthness and the complaining and the disliking and whatnot, Habakkuk finally gets to the place where you and I also need to get to. He says, I have heard about you, God. Well, I've heard a lot about the Lord over the years. Maybe you have too. Some of the things I've heard probably aren't accurate. Some of the things that I've heard, probably I didn't want to listen to. Some of the times God speaks to my heart and I just wish he'd go away. You know, don't bother me, God, with this, please now. But he hangs around anyway. And maybe some of you have never heard about God. Maybe this is the first time that you've ever begun to think that God cares. And so we find in these words encouragement for you and for me. He said, I've heard about you, Lord. I am filled with awe by your amazing works. I'm amazed at the beauty around where I live. The sun sets, the sun rises, the way the clouds linger in the valleys, the greenness in the summer and the not so greenness in the winter. But I'm even more amazed by the people I see. Last Sunday, we had a pretty good attendance. Well, with COVID, our numbers have been down like everybody else's probably. And we have a lot of people who listen online, and I don't know who they are and how many of them there are. And then we have people who set out in the parking lot because we transmit the service through an FM transmitter out to the parking lot. But I'm amazed at looking at the people. God has made an incredible landscape of people. The way we look, the way we smile, the differences, the similarities. It really doesn't take much effort to see God's handiwork around us. All we really have to do is look. And Habakkuk says that. I am amazed, he says, of all the things I see. And then he says this, in this our deep need. Israel's in trouble during this prophet. Of course, Israel's always in trouble, it seems like. They seem to walk with God and everything's great, and then they fall away from God and everything falls apart, and then they reach out to God and things are good again. Then they fall apart and everything falls with them, and then it's just this cycle that goes on and on and on and on and on. And maybe that's your life. Everything's wonderful, and then you take God for granted and forget about him, and all of a sudden things aren't so wonderful. And then you reach out to him, and then things get wonderful again. Because he says here, in this time of our need, help us. Help us again, as you did in years gone by. In this time of need, Habakkuk says, God, help us again, like you've done before. You see, God doesn't change. He hasn't changed in the difference between chapter 1 and chapter 3 here. He hasn't changed since the days of Habakkuk and the days of today. He hasn't changed since I was born and still I die. He hasn't changed from the time I'm on this earth to when my great, 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 great grandkids are on this earth. He's always there. And we can ask him to help. Habakkuk has no qualms. Even though he argued with him in the beginning, he still said, help us again, Lord, like you did before. Don't abandon us. Don't leave us in our struggles. We need you, God, to work in our lives. That's what Habakkuk is saying. And I think that's what we should say. And then he finishes this chapter. You went out to rescue your chosen people, to save your anointed ones. Well, in the Old Testament times, Israel was the chosen people. In New Testament times, since Jesus came along, everybody is God's chosen people. Yeah, that's right. Everybody. Nobody's left out. Nobody is forgotten. Not even you. Not even that awful person who lives down the street. Not even the one who says the most gosh awful junk out of his mouth or her mouth. We're still the chosen one. God still wants us to walk with him. And so Habakkuk can say, you went out, you sought, you, God, took the initiative. And he still does. Well, we're going to finish up with Habakkuk tomorrow. One more little thing to notice here, and I hope you'll stay with me. Thanks for listening. If you have a need or a prayer concern, let us know. We'll do whatever we can, as fast as we can, to help meet your need. God bless you. I'll talk to you again.